The colony world of Kepler 442b died in 17 minutes. Admiral Vexithara Nimralith watched the orbital bombardment through her command vessel's view screen, mandibles clicking with satisfaction as the human settlement became a crater of molten glass. The HFY hegemony had spoken, and these soft-skinned mammals had finally learned their place in the cosmic hierarchy. "Send the recording to their homeworld," she commanded, her crystalline voice echoing through the bridge. "Let them see what happens to species that refuse to kneel." On the surface below, Dr. Kalen Voss crawled through the burning wreckage of New Geneva's research facility, his environmental suit's alerts screaming warnings about radiation levels. Around him lay the bodies of 3,000 colonists, scientists, engineers, families who had chosen to build something beautiful on this distant world rather than submit to alien tyranny. His wife Nira lay trapped beneath a collapsed beam, her life signs flickering on his suit's display. "The children," she whispered through their comm link. "The evacuation pods." Kalen's hands shook as he tried to lift the debris. The pods had launched, but the HFY had targeted them with surgical precision. No survivors, no mercy. "They're safe," he lied, watching her vitals flatline. 3 systems away, the message reached Earth's sole defense command. Fleet Admiral Rethis Korvaw, a man whose ancestors had survived the gene wars and the climate exodus, stood before the Terran Council with his jaw set like granite. "They've given us their answer," he said, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's collective fury. "The HFY hegemony believes we are weak because we negotiate, because we seek peace first and war last." The holographic display showed the carnage. Families incinerated, children hunted from orbit, a thriving colony reduced to radioactive slag in minutes. Council Speaker Yalith Miran Kaur leaned forward. "What do you recommend, Admiral? We show them what human war actually looks like." In the depths of Earth's lunar shipyards, automated systems began their deadly chorus. The Thanatos Protocol, humanity's most classified military doctrine, activated for the first time in the species' history. Shipyards that had been building peaceful exploratory vessels suddenly retooled for a different purpose entirely. Kalen Voss, now the sole survivor of New Geneva, transmitted his final message to Earth before the radiation claimed him. "They hunted our children like animals. They laughed while they burned our homes. Whatever you do, make them remember why we built those ships to carry families to the stars. Make them remember what happens when you slaughter the families of Earth." The message reached Admiral Korvaw as he watched the first wave of vessels roll out of construction, ships that bore names like Righteous Fury, Kepler's Vengeance, and Children's Lament. Each one bristled with weapons humanity had hoped never to build, powered by reactors that could level continents. But it wasn't the ships that would terrify the galaxy. It was what they carried inside. "Sir," his aide, Commander Linux Kethval, reported, "the volunteer lists are unprecedented." Korvaw nodded grimly. Every human colony, every orbital station, every Mars settlement had sent the same message. They were coming home to Earth, not to flee, to fight. The HFY had awakened something ancient in the human genome, something their peaceful centuries among the stars had only temporarily suppressed. They had reminded humanity that they were the children of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years, descendants of creatures that had clawed their way to the top of the food chain through sheer, relentless violence. As the first 1,000 starships prepared to launch, Admiral Korvaw's final transmission echoed across human space. They drew first blood. Now they learn why Earth's children carry the fire of dead worlds in their hearts. The war was about to begin. The HFY hegemony controlled 17 star systems and considered themselves the apex predators of their local galactic arm. There, crystalline biology had evolved on a world where only the most ruthless survived, creating a species that viewed compassion as evolutionary weakness and diplomacy as the refuge of cowards. Overlord Sekthul Vorthani reclined in his obsidian command, thrown aboard the dreadnought Bone Harvester, reviewing intelligence reports with growing amusement. The humans had responded to Kepler 442b's destruction exactly as predicted, with ineffectual protests and desperate pleas for negotiation. Their delegation arrives tomorrow, reported War Speaker Nexvara Kelim, her carapace gleaming with ceremonial scarification. 12 vessels, no weapons signatures. They come begging as expected. But in the depths of space beyond Proxima Centauri, a different kind of gathering was taking place. The human fleet grew not in ones or tens, but in hundreds. Ships emerged from every colony world, every mining station, every deep space habitat humanity had established in their 3 centuries among the stars. Fleet Admiral Korval stood in the command center of his flagship, Nemesis rising, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Each dot represented not just a vessel, but a promise kept. Humanity had scattered across the cosmos as explorers and pioneers, but when called to war, they came home. Status. Report, Commodore, he ordered. Commodore Zelak Thornvex consulted her datapad. Wave 1, 837 vessels ready for deployment. Wave 2, 612 still inbound. Wave 3, she paused, checking the numbers twice. Wave 3 reports over 2,000 vessels, sir, including the generation ships. Korval's expression darkened. The generation ships? Humanities? Massive colony vessels that had carried millions to distant worlds weren't just joining the fight. They were converting themselves into weapons of unprecedented scale. On the bridge of the generation ship New Horizon, Captain Dralith Grim Kess supervised the installation of weapons arrays that had never appeared in any military blueprint. Her vessel, designed to nurture life across interstellar distances, was becoming something else entirely. A carrier for humanity's most devastating weapon systems. Engineering reports ready, Captain, called out her tactical officer, Lieutenant Vorix Shan Kale. The mass drivers are online. Payload bays converted. We're carrying enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Good. Grim Kess watched her crew work with desperate efficiency. Many of them had family on Kepler 442b. Their children would never see justice, but their sacrifice would ensure no other human colony suffered the same fate. Meanwhile, the Kethvari delegation waited at the agreed-upon coordinates, expecting to receive humanity's surrender. Ambassador General Kex Haramorthan prepared her species' standard terms: total submission, tribute payments, and the dismantling of all human military assets. They're actually coming, she reported to Overlord Vorthani. Sensors confirm 12. Vessels approaching. No escort, minimal defenses. The humans are broken as we calculated. But the ships approaching the meeting point weren't carrying diplomats. They carried volunteers, men and women who had requested the honor of delivering humanity's real response to the Kethvari ultimatum. Captain Voxen Kralthes commanded the lead vessel, a converted mining ship called Last Words. His crew of 43 had all lost someone at Kepler 442b. His daughter had been studying xenobiology there, dreaming of peaceful contact with alien species. Message prepared, sir, reported his communications officer. Transmit it, Kralthes ordered. The message that reached the Kethvari delegation was not what they expected. Instead of surrender, they received a single image, the charred remains of a human child recovered from New Geneva's ruins. Then came the words that would echo through galactic history. You hunted our children. Now learn what it means to be hunted by Earth's children. The 12 human ships detonated simultaneously, their modified fusion reactors creating a chain reaction that lit up the entire system. The Kethvari delegation was vaporized instantly, but that wasn't the point. The point was the message the explosion sent across space, visible to every sensor array within 50 light-years. Overlord Vorthani received the news with stunned disbelief. They committed suicide just to threaten us? War Speaker Kalem consulted. her tactical displays. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. Something is happening. Something was indeed happening." In the depths of Sol System, Admiral Korval gave the order that would reshape the balance of power in their corner of the galaxy. "All vessels prepare for jump. Target, HFY Prime. Authorization code. Remember Kepler." 1,000 starships began their synchronized hyperspace entry, carrying with them the full fury of a species that had just learned the true cost of peace among the stars. The HFY had wanted to see what human war looked like. They were about to get their wish. The HFY homeworld of Kethmori had never known fear. For 8,000 years, their crystalline cities had stood inviolate, protected by orbital defense platforms that could shatter asteroids and a fleet that had conquered every species foolish enough to challenge them. Overlord Vorthani materialized in the Supreme War Chamber, his form crackling with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Around him, the hegemony's greatest military minds gathered in emergency session, their crystalline bodies refracting the chamber's crimson light into patterns of controlled panic. "Report," he commanded. War Speaker Kilim's form flickered with tactical data. "Long-range sensors detect a massive hyperspace distortion approaching our outer perimeter. Configuration suggests impossible numbers, Overlord. Define impossible." "Over 1,000 vessels, sir, moving in perfect formation. Their emergence signature suggests they've been traveling in synchronized hyperspace for 7 standard cycles, the exact time since Kepler 442b. A chill ran through the chamber. The humans hadn't responded with desperate diplomacy or panicked retreat. They had been planning this moment since the first human child died under HFY bombardment. High above Kethmori's atmosphere, reality tore open in 1,000 places simultaneously. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like the claws of an ancient god, each vessel positioned with mathematical precision around the planet's orbital plane. Admiral Korval stood on the bridge of Nemesis Rising, watching the HFY homeworld turn slowly below them. Cities of living crystal stretched across continents, beautiful and terrible in their alien majesty. Soon, they would be nothing but dust and memory. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, Commander Nilex Vorth Kane, "enemy defense platforms are powering up. Fleet Admiral Texmarai Shenvos reports Wave 2 ready for deployment. Hold position. I want them to see us first." The sight that greeted the HFY was beyond their darkest strategic nightmares. Human ships filled their orbital space like a metal constellation. Vessels of every size and configuration, from nimble destroyers to the massive generation ships that blotted out star patterns. Each one bore the scars of hasty weapon installation and the names of the dead: Kepler's Vengeance, New Geneva's Wrath, Children's Lament. "Overlord." Vorthani's emergency transmission reached the human fleet moments later. "Unknown human commander, you are in violation of hegemony sovereign space. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation." Admiral Korval's response was delivered on all frequencies in perfect HFY military protocol. "I am Fleet Admiral Rethus Korval of the Terran Defense Force. You will surrender unconditionally and face trial for the genocide at Kepler 442b, or we will demonstrate why humans are the only species to have survived 3 mass extinction events on their homeworld." The silence that followed lasted exactly 30 seconds, long enough for the HFY to process the impossible scope of what they faced. Then the orbital defense platforms opened fire. The battle that followed redefined warfare for every species in the galactic arm. The HFY possessed superior individual ship technology, weapons that could core a vessel with crystalline precision, and defense platforms that had held their world inviolate for millennia, but they had never faced an enemy that fought like humans. Captain Drelith Grim Kess watched from the bridge of New Horizon as the first wave of defenders closed with her generation ship. The massive vessel had been converted into something unprecedented, a mobile fortress carrying not just weapons, but the accumulated rage of an entire species. "Launch fighters," she ordered. What emerged from New Horizon's bays weren't military craft. They were mining shuttles, cargo haulers, and personal transport vehicles, every piece of flying metal that could carry a human pilot and a fusion warhead. Volunteers who had painted their children's names on the hulls before strapping themselves in for one-way missions. The HFY Defense Coordinator, War Master Helthek Grimsorrow, watched in horror as human pilots deliberately rammed his defensive positions. "They're not trying to win," he transmitted. "They're trying to die, taking us with them." But that wasn't entirely accurate. The human fleet moved with deadly coordination, each sacrifice calculated for maximum strategic impact. When a mining shuttle detonated against a defense platform, it weakened the shields just enough for the destroyers behind it to punch through with precision strikes. Admiral Korval coordinated the assault with cold precision, his tactical display showing the systematic dismantling of HFY defenses. Each loss was noted, each sacrifice honored, but the advance never wavered. "Sir," reported Commodore Thornvex, "the generation ship Distant Dreams reports they're in position over the southern continent. They're requesting permission to deploy the Scorched Earth Protocol." Korval nodded grimly. The Scorched Earth Protocol was humanity's ultimate weapon, not a device, but a doctrine. The systematic targeting of every piece of infrastructure that allowed a civilization to function. Granted. Message to all ships. Remember what they did to our children. Show them the difference between conquest and extinction. As the human fleet began its methodical bombardment of Kethmori's crystalline cities, a new message went out across the galaxy. Not from Earth, but from the dying homeworld of the HFY hegemony. This is what happens when you mistake human mercy for human weakness. The fire of 1,000 starships lit up the alien sky, and the galaxy learned that some species should never be pushed to their breaking point. The bombardment of Kethmori lasted exactly 12 hours, 1 hour for every human colony the HFY had threatened, plus 1 final hour for the children who died at Kepler 442b. Overlord Vorthani crouched in the wreckage of his palace, his crystalline form cracked and bleeding luminescent fluid. Around him, the capital city of Sekthara was a maze of shattered spires and melted crystal formations. The humans hadn't simply destroyed their cities, they had systematically dismantled every piece of infrastructure that made HFY civilization possible. War Speaker Kalim dragged herself through the rubble, her communication arrays sparking with damaged bioluminescence. "Overlord, the defense fleet?" "Gone," Vorthani finished. "All of it. 27 dreadnoughts, 43 battlecruisers, over 200 support vessels." He gestured weakly at the tactical display that still flickered in the ruins. "They sacrifice 400 ships to destroy our entire fleet. What kind of species calculates victory in acceptable losses like that?" The answer came from the human fleet still in orbit. Admiral Korval's message reached every surviving communication node on the planet, the kind that remembers its children's screams. On the bridge of Nemesis Rising, Fleet Admiral Korval reviewed the casualty reports with grim satisfaction. 400 vessels lost, 60,000 crew members dead, the largest single-day loss in human military history. But the strategic objective was complete. The HFY hegemony no longer existed as a military power. "Sir," reported Commodore Thornvex, "we're receiving surrender offers from their outer colonies. 14 systems requesting immediate ceasefire." "Denied." Korval's voice carried the weight of a species' judgment. They chose genocide as their opening move. Now they learn the consequences. Commander Nilex Vorth Kane looked up from her station. "Admiral, some of our ship commanders are requesting permission to begin ground operations." Captain Voxeth Kryn Mal specifically wants to lead landing parties to secure their government centers. Negative. We're not conquerors. We're exterminators, the Yavu. Distinction was important. Humanity had learned, over centuries of expansion into space, that some conflicts could be resolved through diplomacy, others through limited warfare. But genocide demanded a different response entirely, one that would be remembered by every species in the galaxy for millennia to come. Captain Grim Kess received her orders with cold satisfaction. The generation ship New Horizon had been converted into something unprecedented, a planet killer that operated not through raw destructive power, but through systematic infrastructure collapse. "Begin Phase 2, she ordered. From New Horizon's cargo bays, specialized drones deployed across Kethmori's surface. These weren't weapons in any conventional sense. They were anti-civilization devices designed to locate and disable every piece of technology that allowed a complex society to function. Power generation, communication networks, transportation systems, manufacturing centers, all of it systematically identified and neutralized. But the most devastating assault came from an unexpected source, the human ships that had belonged to families and colonists. These vessels, pressed into military service after Kepler 442b, carried something no military planner had anticipated: the personal effects and memories of the dead. Captain Zeleth Voss Kane, commanding the converted colony transport Hope's End, broadcast the final messages from Kepler 442b across every Kethvari communication frequency. Children's voices calling for parents who would never answer. Scientists begging for mercy that never came. Families torn apart by the surgical precision of alien hatred. The psychological impact on the Kethvari was devastating. Their species had evolved for conquest and domination, but they had never faced an enemy that made them hear their victims' final words. In the ruins of his throne room, Overlord Vorthani received the transmission that would haunt his species for generations. "My name was Kalen Voss. My wife's name was Nira. My daughter's name was Lydia. She was 6 years old when your ships killed her. This is what you chose. This is what you created." The recording continued for hours. Every name, every face, every life lost at Kepler 442b. The humans hadn't just come for military victory. They had come to ensure that their dead were remembered and their killers held accountable. As Kethmori's cities burned, Admiral Korva prepared the message that would reshape galactic politics. To all species within reception range of this transmission, the Kethvari hegemony chose to hunt human children for sport. They believed our peace made us weak. Today, they learned the difference between humans who choose peace and humans who have had peace taken from them. The tactical display showed the complete collapse of Kethvari civilization, not through occupation or conquest, but through the systematic removal of everything that made their society possible. They would survive as individuals, but never again as a spacefaring empire. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving diplomatic signals from 17 different species. They're all requesting formal non-aggression pacts." Korva nodded. The galaxy had received the message humanity intended. They were still the peaceful explorers and colonists they had always been, but they were also the children of a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years, and they would never again allow genocide to go unanswered. "Signal the fleet. We're going home." But as the human ships prepared to leave Kethmori's ruins behind, one final message went out across the galaxy, not from Admiral Korval, but from the civilian volunteers who had given their lives to protect humanity's future. "We came in peace. You answered with genocide. Now you know what human war actually looks like. Choose wisely next time." The fire of 1,000 starships began to fade, but their message would burn in galactic memory forever. News of Kethmori's fall spread across the galaxy faster than human ships could travel. Trade routes that had operated under Kethvari protection for centuries suddenly found themselves abandoned. Client species who had paid tribute to the hegemony for generations woke up to find their overlords had simply ceased to exist. The Vorthani Syndicate received the intelligence reports with carefully controlled panic. As the HFY's primary allies, they had participated in the pacification of 17 human colonies, believing themselves protected by their partners' military supremacy. Syndicate Prime Kethvala Sorrowbringer convened her war council in the depths of their fortress world, her chitinous form clicking with agitation. "Confirm the reports," she demanded. Military Coordinator Healthx Voidwalker projected the tactical hologram with trembling appendages. "Kethmori is gone, Prime. Not conquered, eliminated. Their entire military destroyed. Their infrastructure systematically dismantled. The humans left them alive, but essentially prehistoric. Casualties? The humans lost approximately 60,000 crew members and 400 vessels. The HFY lost everything. The silence in the chamber was profound. The Syndicate had built their expansion strategy around the assumption that the HFY were invincible, that their crystalline technology and ruthless tactics made them unbeatable. The idea that a species they considered primitive could not only defeat but completely neutralize the hegemony was beyond their strategic paradigm. "Orders, Prime?" asked War Speaker Nexthul Bone Harvest. Kethvala's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep thought among her species. "Prepare the defensive. Fleets. If the humans are eliminating everyone who participated in their colony attacks." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Every species in their alliance had blood on their claws from human settlements. But Admiral Korval's fleet had no intention of launching immediate follow-up attacks. Instead, they were implementing something far more sophisticated: selective pressure diplomacy. On the bridge of Nemesis Rising, now en route to the Vorthani border, Admiral Korval reviewed intelligence reports from their network of deep space reconnaissance drones. Humanity had spent 3 centuries building peaceful relationships across the galaxy, and those relationships had created something the aggressive species hadn't anticipated: an intelligence network. "Status report, Commodore," he ordered. "Commodore." Thornvex consulted her data streams. "The Kelith Republic has formally withdrawn from their mutual defense pact with the Syndicate. The Mordani Collective is requesting immediate diplomatic contact. And, sir," she paused, checking the data twice. "The Zephyrian Commonwealth is offering to provide staging bases for our fleet." Korval nodded grimly. The galaxy's peaceful species had learned an important lesson from Kethmori's fate. Humans were still the allies they had always been, but they were also the protectors those allies had never realized they needed. The Zephyrians, in particular, had cause to celebrate. Their crystal-based technology made them natural targets for HFY expansion, and only their remote location had kept them safe. Now, with the hegemony destroyed, they could develop their civilization without the constant threat of conquest. Ambassador Lexandra Vorth Shining materialized aboard Nemesis Rising via quantum entanglement communication, her energy form pulsing with grateful frequencies. "Admiral Korval, the Commonwealth wishes to express our profound gratitude for your actions at Kethmori. The HFY had marked our worlds for absorption within the next solar cycle." "No thanks necessary, Ambassador. We were protecting our own people. That you benefited is a welcome side effect." But both leaders understood the larger implications. Humanity had just demonstrated that genocide carried consequences even the galaxy's apex predators couldn't survive. The balance of power had shifted fundamentally, and every aggressive species was now calculating the cost of their expansion plans. The Syndicate received confirmation of this new reality when their border patrol encountered the human advance fleet. What they found wasn't an invasion force. It was something far more terrifying: Captain Vorex Shan Kale commanded the destroyer Final Warning, leading a small flotilla of 12 vessels towards Syndicate space. His orders were specific: deliver humanity's terms and withdraw immediately. No engagement unless fired upon. No negotiation, no compromise. The Syndicate border fleet, 37 vessels strong, surrounded the human ships with weapons charged and shields raised. Fleet Commander Kexthul Darkspear transmitted the standard challenge. Human vessels, you are in violation of Syndicate sovereign space. Withdraw immediately or face destruction. Captain Shan Kale's response was broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Vorex Shan Kale of the Terran Defense Force. We are here to deliver terms for your species' survival. You have 72 hours to withdraw all forces from human, colonial space and pay reparations for your participation in the Kepler 442b genocide. Compliance will result in continued existence. Non-compliance will result in treatment identical to that received by the Kethvari hegemony. You threaten us with 12 ships. Darkspear's laughter echoed across the communication channels. I threaten you with the fire of every human ship in the galaxy. Check your long-range sensors, Commander. We're not the threat. We're the messenger. The Syndicate fleet's sensor arrays immediately detected what their short-range focus had missed: massive hyperspace distortions throughout the outer system. Not visible yet, but unmistakably present. The humans hadn't sent a dozen ships to threaten the Syndicate. They had sent a dozen ships to deliver an ultimatum backed by a fleet that could glass their homeworld. Commander Darkspear found himself faced with the same calculation that was spreading across the galaxy. Was their empire's expansion worth the price the humans had just proven they could extract? As Final Warning and her escorts jumped back to hyperspace, they left behind a message that would reshape galactic civilization. We came in peace. You answered with genocide. The choice of what happens next is entirely yours. The fire of 1,000. Starships had become something more than a weapon. It had become a promise that echoed through every star system where tyranny had once reigned unchallenged. The response to humanity's ultimatum came not from the aggressive species who had participated in genocide, but from the dozens of civilizations who had lived in fear of them for centuries. The Great Assembly of Cathari Prime had not seen such a gathering in over a millennium. Representatives from 43 species materialized in the vast crystal amphitheater, their diverse forms united by a common purpose, ensuring that the humans understood they were not alone in their desire for a galaxy built on cooperation, rather than conquest. Ambassador Veltara Moonwhisper of the Cathari spoke first, her crystalline voice carrying the weight of a species that had lost 3 colonies to Kethvari expansion. Honored representatives, we gather in the aftermath of what our historians will record as the Kepler Reckoning. The humans have demonstrated that even the mightiest predators can be held accountable for genocide. Elder Nixandra Starweaver of the ethereal collective pulsed with supportive energy patterns. The question before us is not whether humanity's actions were justified. The ashes of Kethmori answer that question. The question is how we respond to the opportunity they have created. For 3 days, the Assembly debated, deliberated, and planned. What emerged was unprecedented in galactic history: a formal mutual defense alliance based not on conquest or expansion, but on the simple principle that genocide would never again go unanswered. Admiral Corvaw received the Assembly's proposal, aboard Nemesis Rising as his fleet maintained its position at the edge of Syndicate space. The document was extraordinary in its scope. 43 species formally requesting to join humanity in what they termed the Kepler Accords. It's not a military alliance in the traditional sense, explained Commodore Thornvex as she reviewed the terms. They're offering to pool resources for defense and peaceful expansion, with humanity as the enforcement mechanism. They want us to be the galaxy's police force, Corvaw said grimly. They want us to be what we've always been, sir. The species that chooses peace first and war last. But now the galaxy knows we're also the species that ends wars when others start them with genocide. The Admiral studied the tactical implications. 43 species offering resources, staging bases, intelligence networks, and technological exchange. It would make humanity the de facto protector of nearly half the galaxy's peaceful civilizations. But it also meant responsibility for defending those civilizations if the aggressive species chose to continue their expansionist policies. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Lex Thul Voidsong, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Syndicate homeworld. They're requesting immediate diplomatic contact." The message that followed was exactly what Admiral Korval had been expecting and dreading. Syndicate Prime Kethvala Sorrowbringer appeared on the main display, her chitinous form showing clear signs of stress. "Admiral Korval, the Vorthani Syndicate wishes to discuss terms for peaceful coexistence." "The terms were delivered 72 hours ago, Prime. Withdrawal from human space and reparations for genocide. Your compliance window expires in 18 hours. "You don't understand." Sorrowbringer's mandibles clicked rapidly. "We cannot simply abandon our colonies. Our people—" "Your people participated in the hunting of human children," Korval interrupted. "The same choice you offered our colonists is the choice we offer you. Comply or face the consequences." What the Syndicate Prime couldn't see was the massive fleet positioning itself just outside her system's perimeter. Not just human ships, but vessels from the Kepler Accords, species who had decided that their best chance for survival lay in ensuring that aggressive expansion carried unbearable costs. The Ethereal Collective had provided quantum-enhanced targeting systems. The Cathari Republic offered their industrial base for weapons manufacturing. The Gentle Mordani provided their biotechnology for improved medical support. 43 species, many of whom had never built a warship, were now contributing to humanity's ability to enforce galactic law. Commander Nilex Vorth Kane monitored the tactical displays as Allied vessels took position alongside human ships. "Sir, this is unprecedented. We have over 1,500 vessels in the formation, and only about half of them are ours." "The galaxy is learning an important lesson, Commander. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of justice." As the deadline approached, the Syndicate faced the same impossible choice the Kethvari had confronted: abandon their expansionist policies or face systematic elimination. But unlike the hegemony, they chose surrender. The transmission from Sorrowbringer came with 3 hours remaining on the ultimatum. The Vorthani Syndicate formally withdraws all claims to human colonial space and agrees to pay reparations, as specified. We request inclusion in your Kepler Accords." Admiral Korval's response would echo through galactic history. "The Accords are open to any species that chooses cooperation over conquest. But understand this. Membership comes with responsibilities. If you benefit from our protection, you also bear the obligation to protect others." As the crisis de-escalated, something remarkable happened. For the first time in recorded galactic history, peace was not simply the temporary absence of war between competing powers, it was an actively maintained condition, backed by the combined will of species who had decided that civilization was worth defending. The fire of 1,000 starships had become the foundation of a new galactic order, built not on the ashes of conquest, but on the promise that some lines would never again be crossed without consequences. But in the depths of space, other predator species watched and calculated, wondering if humanity's resolve would hold when faced with truly existential threats. 3 months after the fall of Keth Mori, Admiral Korval stood in the observation deck of Nemesis Rising, watching. Construction crews from dozen species worked together to build something that had never existed, a joint military facility dedicated to preventing genocide rather than conducting it. The Kepler Memorial Station orbited the ruins of humanity's lost colony, its design incorporating architectural elements from every species in the Accords. But at its heart lay the memorial wall, 3,000 names etched in quantum crystal, each one representing a life lost to the HFY's first blood. Sir, Commodore Thorn Vex joined him at the viewport. We've received the final intelligence. Reports from our deep space reconnaissance. Admiral Korval accepted the data pad, already knowing what it would contain. The galaxy was dividing into two clear factions. The Kepler Accords, representing 47 species committed to cooperative expansion and mutual defense, and the Shadow Compact, a loose alliance of predator species who viewed humanity's actions as an existential threat to their way of life. The Ravager clans have been mobilizing for 6 weeks, Thorn Vex reported. Intelligence suggests they're planning a coordinated strike against our outer colonies. Their logic appears to be that if they can demonstrate human vulnerability, the Accords will collapse. Korval nodded grimly. The Ravagers were different from the HFY, where the hegemony had been methodical conquerors. The clans were pure destructionists. They didn't want territory or tribute. They wanted the thrill of watching civilizations burn. Estimated fleet strength? Over 2,000 vessels, sir. But that's not what concerns our analysts. Thorn Vex highlighted several data points. They're not targeting our military installations. Intelligence suggests they're planning to hit civilian targets simultaneously. Every human colony, research station, and trade hub they can reach. The implications were staggering. The Ravagers weren't seeking military victory. They were attempting to provoke humanity into the kind of total war that would destroy the moral foundation of the Kepler Accords. If humans responded to mass civilian casualties with indiscriminate retaliation, the galaxy's peaceful species would lose faith in their protectors. They're trying to turn us into them, Korval realized. Yes, sir. Force us to choose between protecting our people and maintaining our principles. But the Ravager clans had made the same fundamental miscalculation as every other predator species humanity had encountered. They assumed that human morality was a weakness rather than a different kind of strength. Admiral Korval activated his command implant, opening simultaneous channels to every human fleet commander in the galaxy. All units, this is Admiral Korval. Execute Protocol Guardian Angel. Authorization. Remember Kepler, protect tomorrow. Protocol Guardian Angel was humanity's answer to the impossible choice between morality and survival. Rather than responding to genocide with genocide, they would demonstrate that civilization could defend itself without becoming the monster. Across human space, a different kind of mobilization began. Every civilian transport, cargo hauler, and colonial shuttle received priority routing to evacuation coordinates. But these weren't retreats. They were strategic repositioning operations designed to deny the Ravagers their intended targets while preserving human lives. Captain Draelith. Grim Kess, now commanding the fully militarized generation ship New Horizon, received her orders with cold satisfaction. Her vessel and 7 other converted colony ships would serve as mobile refugee centers, capable of evacuating entire colonies within hours. Begin Operation Shepherd, she ordered. Every human civilian in the outer colonies needs to be aboard, Allied vessels within 72 hours. But the evacuation was only half of Guardian Angel. The other half was being coordinated by a man the galaxy had thought was dead. Dr. Kalen Voss materialized via quantum hologram in Admiral Korval's ready room, his form flickering with the instability of long-range transmission. He had survived the radiation of Kepler 442b through a combination of medical technology and sheer stubborn refusal to die before his wife's killers faced justice. Admiral? His voice carried the weight of 3 months in radiation treatment. The Ravager fleet composition suggests they're planning simultaneous strikes on 47 targets. But their tactics rely on shock and overwhelming force against unprepared civilians. What are you proposing, Doctor? Voss's smile was terrifying in its implications. We give them exactly what they expect, helpless civilian targets, and then We show them what human civilians become when their children are threatened. The plan that emerged from that conversation would be studied in military academies for centuries. Rather than evacuating human civilians and leaving empty colonies for the Ravagers to destroy meaninglessly, they would appear to evacuate while actually positioning the galaxy's most advanced defensive technology where it would be most effective. Every civilian transport that departed human colonies carried not just families, but compact fusion reactors, automated defense systems, and volunteers trained in the kind of asymmetric warfare that had allowed humans to survive every extinction event their homeworld had thrown at them. The Ravager clans launched their coordinated assault exactly as intelligence had predicted, expecting to find helpless colonies and fleeing civilians. Instead, they found something that redefined the concept of civilian defense. War Chief Golthek Blooddrinker led the attack on the mining colony of Kepler 438c, bringing 200 vessels to overwhelm what should have been a lightly defended civilian target. His tactical display showed the expected pattern: minimal defensive signatures, civilian vessels fleeing in panic, infrastructure left unprotected. "Begin orbital bombardment," he ordered, anticipating the same easy slaughter that had made his clan's reputation. The mining colony's response was not what any military doctrine had prepared the Ravagers to face. Instead of desperate pleas for mercy or futile defensive fire, they received a transmission from Dr. Kalen Voss himself. "War Chief Blooddrinker, my name is Kalen Voss. I am the sole survivor of Kepler 442b, and I have been waiting to meet you." The mining colony exploded, not from Ravager bombardment, but from within. The entire installation had been converted into a massive fusion device, its detonation calculated to take out exactly 200 attacking vessels at optimal range. Similar scenes played out across 47 star systems simultaneously. The Ravagers found not helpless civilians, but a species that had spent 3 months preparing to demonstrate the difference between victimization and retaliation. When the tactical reports reached the Shadow Compact, they told a story that shattered every assumption about human warfare. The Ravager clans had lost over 1,800 vessels in a single coordinated operation, but they hadn't destroyed a single human life. Every civilian target had been either evacuated or converted into a defensive installation manned by volunteers. The message that followed the destruction of the Ravager fleet was broadcast across the galaxy on all frequencies. "This is Admiral Rethis Korval of the Terran Defense Force. To the species of the Shadow Compact, you have now seen 3 examples of human warfare. The Kethvari chose genocide and were eliminated. The Syndicate chose surrender and were spared. The Ravagers chose to target our civilians and were destroyed by those same civilians. The pattern should be clear. We will match the level of conflict. You choose, but we will always exceed your ability to sustain it." The transmission continued with an image that would define humanity's place in galactic civilization. The memorial wall on Kepler Station, with 3,000 names etched in quantum. Crystal, surrounded by representatives from 47 species who had pledged to ensure those names were never forgotten. "We came to the stars in peace. We will remain in the stars in peace. But we are the children of a world that tried to kill us for millions of years, and we have never forgotten how to survive. Choose wisely." As the fire of humanity's response faded from the void where the Ravager fleet once prowled, a new reality settled over the galaxy. Peace was no longer simply the absence of conflict. It was an actively maintained condition, backed by species who had decided that civilization was worth any price. In the depths of space, the remaining predator species calculated and recalculated, slowly reaching the same conclusion. The age of easy conquest was over. Humanity had not just drawn a line in the stars, they had made it clear that crossing that line would cost more than any empire could afford to pay. The war that began with the hunting of human children had ended with the birth of the first truly peaceful galactic civilization. And at its heart lay a simple promise: etched in quantum crystal and backed by the fire of 1,000 starships. Never again. The children of Earth had come home from the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians. And the galaxy would never be the same.